Imagine your day so far. Just really think about it. If you are like most of us, it's probably been a total blur of screens, notifications, just rushing from one place to another.
Yeah, weaving through traffic or dodging people on a crowded sidewalk.
Exactly. Your brain is processing a million inputs a second, and your body is honestly just along for the ride. It's tight, it's braced against all that noise.
Just entirely tense.
Right. Now, I want you to step out of that frantic reality for just a moment. Imagine pushing open a door and walking into a space that feels completely different. You are standing inside Studio Biopilates Paris.
Oh, the contrast there is incredible.
It really is.
Yeah.
Sunlight is streaming through these large windows. It's gliding over these incredible pieces of equipment called reformers.
And they are lined up with absolute, just perfect precision.
Yeah, they look less like typical gym equipment and, I don't know, more like fine mechanics in a really high-end workshop. The springs are shining subtly, the straps are perfectly arranged.
And the sound, or rather the lack of it.
Exactly. There's no loud music pumping through speakers. There's no chaotic energy. Instead, there's a silence. But it's not an empty silence. It's this silence filled with a pure, focused attention.
It's a striking contrast, isn't it? I mean, just setting that scene changes your breathing a little bit.
It really does.
That is exactly the atmosphere we are exploring today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are looking at the insights of Caroline Berger de Fémynie.
The founder of that studio.
Right. And our goal today is to shift your perspective on what it actually means to exercise. We're going to explore how true movement is. It's far less about brute muscular force and much more about reorganizing your entire nervous system.
We're basically going to uncover the hidden language of the human body.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because jumping straight into the idea of the nervous system is a pretty big shift from how most of us think about, hitting the gym.
It's a massive shift.
Caroline's foundational philosophy centers entirely on this concept of calm. She points out that modern life is incredibly fast and dispersed. We bounce from screen to screen, meeting to meeting.
But the human nervous system simply does not operate on that logic.
Right.
It requires calm, it requires repetition, and it requires absolute precision to actually learn anything new. I mean, if the space you're in is agitated, your attention just scatters.
And a movement completely loses its quality.
That is the crucial why behind the silence in her studio. Most people think of Pilates, or really any exercise, as just a way to get stronger, maybe tone up, burn calories.
Just sweat it out.
Exactly. But Caroline's approach demonstrates that Pilates isn't merely a strengthening method. It is a complete reorganization of movement. When you learn to move differently in that quiet, focused environment, it's not just your bicep or your hamstring doing the work.
The whole system is shifting.
Yes, your breathing, your posture, coordination, your balance, even your spatial awareness.
Like how you perceive your own body in the space around you.
Exactly. It all changes progressively. The calm environment isn't just, a nice spa-like perk.
Right.
It's an actual physiological prerequisite for that deep neurological work.
I know when I try to do like a simple core exercise at home or in a crowded gym, I am shaking, I'm holding my breath. I am just praying for the timer to end.
We've all been there.
But then you look at students in an environment like this studio, and it leads perfectly into what I like to call the swan illusion.
Oh, I love that term.
If you have ever watched a Pilates class from the outside, it looks incredibly graceful. You see someone lying down on this beautiful machine, gently pushing a sliding carriage back and forth, and you think, oh, I could do that in my sleep.
Like they're basically just taking a nap on a moving bed.
Exactly.
Right, but what the casual observer does not see is the hidden reality. They don't see the invisible mechanics operating right beneath the surface of that smooth glide.
What are they missing?
Well, they don't see the fine, really granular attention required to stabilize the pelvis so it doesn't rock even a single millimeter. They don't see the exact organization of the shoulder blades sliding down the back. And they certainly don't see how the breath is being intentionally recruited to support that muscular action.
So the outward movement looks simple.
But the internal architecture holding it all together is incredibly complex and requires intense focus.
I'm trying to wrap my head around how this actually works in practice, though. Because Caroline mentions that you can have two people doing the exact same exercise, pushing the exact same carriage, but for completely different reasons.
Yes.
How can two people doing the exact same physical motion be getting two entirely different workouts?
It all comes down to intention. And it completely redefines the whole concept of a workout. If you just push that carriage away with your leg muscles, The movement remains entirely superficial.
You're just moving a spring.
You're just moving a spring. But if you push from the center of your body, maintaining a perfectly stable pelvis and using your breath to support the effort,
It changes everything.
suddenly that exact same physical motion becomes profound. For one person, the intent might be to strengthen the deep stabilizing muscles of the pelvis.
Okay.
But for the second person, the goal is actually just to reorganize their breathing patterns so they don't hold their breath under stress.
And for a third person.
The entire point is just to rediscover how to move a joint without triggering a pain response.
Which perfectly sets up this analogy that Caroline uses, framing Pilates as a language. Think about that for a second. The overall movement you are doing, say, pushing the carriage out and bringing it back, that is a sentence.
Right.
The tiny physical corrections the instructor gives you, like tucking a rib or dropping a shoulder, those are the nuances.
The grammar of the language.
Exactly.
Right.
And the instructor's real job is learning how to read this language as it is spoken by the student's body.
It is a beautiful way to frame it. The body communicates its history, its injuries, its daily habits, all through posture and movement.
A hunched shoulder tells a story.
A collapsed arch in the foot tells a story. The instructor is essentially translating that physical language in real time to guide the student back to balance.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's take that language metaphor and put it to the ultimate test.
Okay.
Paint a picture of this in your mind. Caroline describes a semi-private class dynamic that sounds, frankly, impossible to manage.
It really does.
Imagine you are in a room with 4 other people. In this single class, working out at the exact same time, she has one person living with multiple sclerosis.
MS, yeah.
Next to them is a patient currently undergoing cancer treatment.
Okay.
Next to them is a perfectly healthy, athletic person. Then, someone with a torn supraspinatus, like a rotator cuff, tear in the shoulder.
Okay.
And finally, someone with respiratory issues who has to keep an inhaler right next to their mat, all in the same room, all doing the same hour-long class.
It is a breathtaking spectrum of physical realities to manage simultaneously, and what is truly marvelous is how she orchestrates it.
She doesn't just give them 5 completely different routines, right?
No, if she did that, the room would lose its focus. It would just be chaotic. Instead, they all follow the exact same underlying structure of the class. They move together.
But with adaptations.
Exactly. The instructor is making permanent, real-time adaptations for every single individual.
She uses the metaphor of an orchestra conductor.
Which is perfect. Think of the class structure as the symphony. Every student in that room is playing a slightly different partition of the music.
So the instructor is adjusting springs, maybe modifying a seated position.
Changing an angle to suit the specific instrument, the body, that the student brought in that day. But the entire room, the collective energy and flow, must remain completely harmonious.
That demands a level of presence from the instructor that is staggering.
Oh, absolutely. They are constantly observing a student's breath, their posture, the tension in their neck, before they even open their mouth to give a command. They cannot just demonstrate an exercise and walk away.
So how does the conductor actually start this symphony? Let's walk through the actual progression of this class, starting with the very first diagnostic tool.
The anchor.
Yeah, it always begins with something called footwork on the reformer.
Yeah.
Imagine you are the student.
Yeah.
You are lying on your back, your feet are on a padded bar at the end of the machine.
And you are simply bending and straightening your legs to push the carriage away.
Right. Why is that the anchor for everything that follows?
Caroline starts here because the footwork is essentially a diagnostic scan hidden inside a basic warm-up. It immediately tells her how the person's body is organizing itself today.
What exactly is she looking for?
She watches how the foot places itself on the bar. How does the ankle react under load? How does the pelvis stabilize as the legs extend?
Okay, so give me an example.
Sure. If she sees your weight falling entirely onto your big toe as you push, she knows your knee is likely collapsing inward. If your weight rolls to the outside edge of the foot, you are losing ankle stability.
And based on that scan, the real-time spring adjustments begin.
Right, because the springs dictate the resistance on the carriage.
So for the completely healthy person in the room, Caroline might load up 3 red springs. That gives them a solid, heavy push to really engage the leg muscles.
But then she walks over to the cancer patient, and she might immediately drop that down to 2 red springs.
Because the intent there is completely different.
Exactly. The cancer patient's body is fighting a massive internal battle. It might be deeply fatigued on a cellular level.
So the goal isn't to crush them with a hard workout.
No, the goal is to move the body, to articulate the joints and stimulate the system while actively conserving their precious energy. You don't want to exhaust them in the first 5 minutes with heavy resistance.
That makes total sense.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the student with multiple sclerosis. Their spring weight is highly variable, depending entirely on the day.
Right, it fluctuates.
Some days, their nervous system is firing well, and they can handle a full red spring. Other days, sudden neurological fatigue sets in rapidly.
And she has to drop the resistance way down just to make the movement possible without short-circuiting their system.
This raises an important question about how we view resistance in general. Consider the student with the torn supraspinatus in their shoulder.
Yeah, this is a great example.
For them, Caroline actually reduces the spring resistance significantly. Why is that?
Think about what happens when your shoulder hurts. Your brain automatically tells your neck and upper back to tense up and help out.
It's just a survival mechanism.
Well, exactly. If Caroline gives that person a heavy spring, their brain hits the panic button and their body will cheat.
It will recruit the neck and the injured shoulder muscles to force the carriage out.
Right. But by lowering the weight, the brain feels safe. The movement stays pure, fluid, and the injured area isn't forced to compensate.
And doesn't she also use a prop for them?
She does. She places a small stability cushion right between their shoulder blades to physically help them keep their chest open.
To prevent any pinching in the rotator cuff.
Exactly.
So it's essentially working smarter, not harder. The springs aren't there to prove how strong you are.
Not at all.
They are tools to access the right muscles, which takes us right into the core work. They move on to the abdominal series. Caroline places a stability cushion under the lumbar spine.
That creates a tiny bit of wobble.
Right, a slight instability that forces all those deep central core muscles to wake up and hold you steady.
They do leg stretches, scissors, and something called front windmills, where you are making controlled circles with your arms while holding resistance straps.
What's fascinating here is how the resistance is applied during this abdominal series.
Yes. Again, it is completely tailored. The healthy student might use 2 springs, adding a significant challenge for the arms and the core as they make those windmill circles.
But the other students might use just 1 spring.
Or even a half spring. The crucial takeaway is that the goal is never to increase the difficulty just for the sake of a spectacle.
It is entirely about maintaining the absolute precision of the movement.
Right. If you give someone too much resistance, their form breaks down, their back arches, and they aren't working their core anymore. They're just straining.
From there, the progression moves up the body. They putting straps on their feet for the banana stretch, where your body forms a slight curve, stretching the side body, while your legs are supported by the straps.
And again, the focus is on core stability.
Keeping the pelvis quiet, rather than seeing how huge of a stretch you can force.
Exactly.
Then, they move to a different machine, the Cadillac, for mid-back work.
Ah, the Cadillac.
For anyone who hasn't seen one, it literally looks like a 4-poster bed frame made of sturdy metal pipes rigged up with various springs and trapeze bars.
It looks a little intimidating at first glance.
It really does. But it's actually designed to provide profound support. They use straps in their hands to rotate their forearms and engage the shoulder blades.
And this is where we see another layer of brilliant adaptation regarding posture.
How so?
Well, when doing this mid-back work on the Cadillac, the healthy person is instructed to maintain a flexed trunk, meaning their head and shoulders are curled up off the mat with their legs completely straight out.
That demands massive abdominal engagement and spinal stability just to hold the position while the arms work.
It's incredibly tough. But for the other students, Caroline changes their base of support. She has them keep their head down, resting completely flat on the mat.
With their knees bent in a tabletop position, right?
Yes. This completely protects the spine and limits the energy drain while still allowing them to get the full benefit of the arm and back work.
That's brilliant. Then we get to the rowing series. Front, back, and side rowing. Imagine you are the healthy student in this scenario.
Okay.
You're kneeling on a moving carriage, pulling straps with your arms. Caroline often puts a small ball between your knees to make you squeeze your inner thighs, forcing you to feel the central axis of your body.
Kneeling on a moving surface while pulling weights is incredibly demanding on your balance.
Now imagine you're the student next to them struggling with balance, perhaps the patient with MS.
Right. For them, Caroline has them sit cross-legged, or she places a sturdy wooden box on the carriage for them to sit on.
Which allows them to maintain a perfectly neutral, healthy spine without fighting a losing battle against gravity.
Think about it. If you are struggling just to not fall over, you cannot possibly focus on the fine details of your breath or the subtle placement of your shoulders.
You're just in survival mode.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The base of support changes, but the integrity of the exercise remains intact.
And during the side rowing, she introduces this subtle trunk rotation. You are turning your upper body to work the oblique muscles, but, and here's the kicker,
Yeah.
without letting your pelvis move a single millimeter.
Total isolation.
Yes, which perfectly primes the body for the physical climax of the class.
Because every class needs a peak, a moment where the entire system is challenged at its highest capacity.
Exactly. We're talking about knee stretches and planks. You're facing the front of the machine, hands on the bar, pushing the carriage backward with your legs.
For the healthy students, this becomes a full plank.
A perfectly straight, rigid line from the top of their head down to their feet on a moving surface. She might even have them add push-ups while holding that plank. It is intense.
Very intense.
But I'm assuming she doesn't have the student with a torn shoulder doing push-ups on a moving carriage.
Definitely not. The adaptation remains. The other students simply perform the movement with their knees resting securely on the machine.
So they still get the core work.
They still have to coordinate their arms, their core, and their legs, creating a stable line from shoulder to knee. They get the intense core engagement, but with a safe, manageable base that doesn't put undue stress on a healing joint or an exhausted nervous system.
After that peak, the body needs to open up.
It does.
Caroline moves them into lateral flexion, the mermaid stretch. The healthy students sit in a classic mermaid position, legs folded to one side, curving their spine sideways over the machine.
And the other students perform the same side bend, but sitting securely on those sturdy boxes again.
The golden rule Caroline enforces here is elongation over amplitude.
This is so important. People always want to bend as far sideways as they possibly can.
Crunching their lower back in the process, just to see how far they can go.
Caroline insists on reaching up toward the ceiling and getting incredibly long through the spine before bending even an inch sideways.
It protects the lower back.
And ensures the stretch actually opens up the ribs rather than just compressing the spine.
Finally, we reach the resolution of the class. She brings the energy down beautifully. They do slow, meditative spinal articulation.
Rolling the spine down onto the mat, bone by bone, completely supported.
Sometimes they squeeze a fitness circle between their knees to keep the hips perfectly aligned. Then, a light running motion on the reformer, just to mobilize the ankles and flush out the legs.
And it ends with deep thigh stretches to release any lingering tension.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can see the absolute genius of the programming.
Oh, without a doubt. Nothing in that hour was isolated. Every single movement, from the very first footwork scan to the final stretch, prepared the body for the next step.
It is a strictly logical progression.
If you try to skip steps or jump straight to the flashy plank without doing the foundational pelvic stabilization first, your body will inevitably compensate.
Usually by straining the neck or the lower back.
Exactly. The continuity, the logical flow, is what allows the nervous system to truly learn a new way of moving rather than just surviving a workout.
So what does this all mean? We have spent this time walking through the intricate details of a very specific approach to Pilates in Paris. But this deep dive is about so much more than springs, straps, and Cadillac machines.
It really is.
It is about recognizing that movement can be a profound tool for self-knowledge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Caroline sums it up beautifully when she notes that when you learn to move with this kind of precision, you experience changes that aren't necessarily spectacular or flashy to an outside observer.
But they are incredibly deep for you.
It changes how you stand while waiting in line at the grocery store. It changes the depth of your breath when you are stressed at work.
Above all, it gives you the increasingly rare sensation of actually being fully present inside your own body.
Inside your own movement. Pilates, at its core, is a conversation between the body and the mind.
And the instructor is simply there to help you hear it.
It is a phenomenal perspective.
We spend so much of our modern lives ignoring our bodies until they yell at us in pain.
Right.
Learning to listen to the whispers, the subtle language of our nervous system before it gets to that point is a complete game changer.
It really is. And to that end, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today.
Okay.
We've talked so much about Pilates being a language and movement being a conversation. So take a second right now and notice how you are sitting or standing or walking as you listen to this.
Check your jaw, your shoulders.
Your lower back. If your default everyday posture is speaking a language, what exactly is it trying to tell you?
That is a great question to take into the rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it gave you a new perspective on how you move through the world. Until next time.